Imagine a realm where the gods of myth aren't gods at all, but cosmic travelers from the depths of space. The ancient astronaut theory proposes that extraterrestrial visitors seeded our greatest monuments, stirred our earliest religions, and perhaps even reshaped us biologically. Time to blast off here on Things Visible and Invisible. For over 2 decades, Jason Martell has worked on his twin passions, entrepreneurship and the study of ancient civilization technologies. His pioneering research on the latter has garnered him global attention. He is the author of the book, Ancient Astronauts, and he joins me down the line from his home in California. Jason, welcome to Things Visible and Invisible.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me on your show.
Now, when I was growing up, Jason, there was a lot of talk about ancient astronauts, but they were kind of a little bit fringe, if I can put it like that. So they were not the sort of things we were taught about in science lessons. And this was at the height of the whole NASA Apollo science expeditions to space. When did you first become interested, acquainted with the whole ancient astronaut idea?
Well, I'm 51 now, so I'd say when I was in my early 20s, as a college student, someone had mentioned that, NASA had been taking pictures of artificial structures on Mars, a face and pyramids. And in my 20s, living in California, my main concern was surfing waves and waiting tables to have a modest income, And so when I heard about this information, I was like, well, if there's a face and pyramids on Mars, why isn't it on the news? Why aren't we seeing it in the newspaper? That sort of thing. And so when I looked into this, just as a layman college student, it turned out that the principal subcontractor for NASA, arming most of the orbiters and landers with cameras, was Malin Space Science Systems. And this camera company, this science company, was also located in San Diego, where I was attending college. So I contacted Dr. Mike Malin and asked him, just as a college student, is there any possibility that there's artificial structures on Mars? And eventually I got a response, which was, no, these are all sand and weather eroded objects. There's no hand being intervention by humans or aliens. And this really raised my curiosity further. And I was able to find other peer level review scientists with PhD credentials for analyzing satellite telemetry. And one of them, a Dr. Mark Carlotto, developed a fractal analysis to look at satellite imagery and detect artificial objects, right? So he'd use his fractal analysis of, let's say, shots of the Soviet Union over Russia or something, and say, oh, look, those are some tanks or troops covered by a tarp. When we used his fractal analysis over the Cydonia region of Mars, where there's a face and pyramidal structures, the face and pyramids got a 98% probability hit of being artificial, again, using a fractal math-based algorithm. NASA never presented any type of research like this. When they first discovered the face on Mars in the 70s, they quickly dismissed it as a trick of light and shadow. So to answer your question, Sean, I became intrigued very early on with going, well, wait a minute. There's artificial structures on a planet within our own solar system. We have stuff all over our own planet here on Earth that we still don't know how far back human origins really go. And that's what kind of sparked my quest into trying to understand some of these questions.
Yes, in your researches, because obviously this would have sparked great interest in the whole ancient astronaut ideas, where do you sort of pinpoint the modern renaissance or interest in ancient astronauts coming through?
It has to be the Bible. For me, I was raised as a Christian, not really deeply in a religious sense, but I became quickly aware of the fact that when I looked into Earth's past and looked at our most ancient cultures that we have, which pretty much lead us to one civilization called Sumer. Modern day Iraq, thousands of years ago, has been called Mesopotamia, Babylon, but it was originally Sumer, right between the Tigris and Euphrates, this fertile strip of land. And so the stories that you have there are essentially the origins of the Bible. And as a Christian, in the English New Testament, there's these stories about, God being visited by angels and man, being created by God. But then it turns out that there's a Hebrew version and an even older Akkadian and a Sumerian version. So for me, Sean, I quickly realized that when you look at the origins of the Bible, they talk about there was once a time when man lived amongst his living gods. And in the Sumerian tales that are still recorded in stone, unchanged, they talk about these beings called the Anunnaki. And they said that they came from a specific planet within our own solar system. It's very specific information, which you get diluted down into the current New King James Version of the Bible. So I quickly realized, wow, wait a minute, they're talking about beings coming from another planet. That doesn't sound like God. That sounds like an extraterrestrial. And I quickly realized that thread plays out across over 30 ancient cultures, which all had very esoteric knowledge of the movements of the solar systems, knowledge of agriculture, astronomy, math, science. And when you ask and you look into the origins of these cultures, the Mayans, Egyptians, Sumerians, Toltecs, Aztecs, they all point back to a time when they lived amongst these teachers, these gods. So I think it's really interesting that when we look at history through a different lens that's not religious, specifically, maybe a blend of science and religion, we start to get some of these more nuanced details about our past.
But if that was the case, Jason, why do you think that there, until maybe the second part of the 20th century, or maybe even late 60s, there wasn't any talk of this, in terms of archaeology or anything else? Why do you think that suddenly, at a certain point in history, in the 1960s, say, people started joining these dots, as you would suggest?
There's a couple answers there. One, we've never been told the full scope of information. Since the 40s, around the time of this Roswell crash, they formed a task force to inform the public called Project Blue Book. And ever since then, they've had this repeating every couple of decades, having a new task force, Project Grudge, the Condon Report. The latest ones are now ATIP, informing the public, who's always been curious, what the heck are these UFOs? What is this stuff? Are aliens real? The task force from the government officially always squashes it. There's no real concern here, folks. We see nothing to worry about. That answer doesn't fly anymore. And what we've had is, since the inception of NASA in the 50s, they consulted a large think tank called the Brookings Institute, and there's something still on file today called the Brookings Report, where they advised NASA, look, if you ever come across like aliens or even any type of biological contaminant that's not from Earth, it needs to be quarantined. The astronauts need to be quarantined. The data needs to be quarantined. Sociological, economic, religious impacts are things that we just can't even factor. So it's all hidden from the public, right? We hear about NASA, but there's also, jokingly, a SNASA, a secret NASA. And this has been going on for at least 50 years, where they have a secret space program that the public's not aware of. So what you have is, over the last 50 years, Sean, is a project of what I would call obfuscation, hiding the true details of what's really going on. The public is finally waking up through the power of the internet and real-time video streams and AI being able to detect things a lot faster. We're catching up with the cover-up rather quickly, so that, the latest explanations, I think, are getting a lot more attention from people. But in the 60s, there was a maintained strong cover-up. Anyone in a scientific realm, archaeology, science, anything like that, if you talked about aliens or UFOs, you were laughed at. But that was only in the public sectors, right? If you go into the private sectors, into the classified research, at the top echelons of data, that has always been the top conversations, but it's being held from the public.
So would you say, Jason, that your sort of ancient astronaut theories are really around the UFO extraterrestrial phenomena and positing it in ancient history and bringing it right up to today? Is that really what this is about, as opposed to maybe what some people think it's about, that there was alien beings that visited us thousands upon thousands of years ago but haven't been back since?
Right. Well, it's a little bit of both, okay? Because they did visit us in the past, and all of the ancient cultures speak of a time when they lived amongst the gods. We don't see them today. Where are they? Where are they hiding? Where did they go? Right? So there's a lot of unanswered questions. But when you start to ask those questions and understand where are they, you realize that, again, there's a deep cover of obfuscation of the data. We're not allowed to see what's going on. We're not allowed to know. And the people that are finally starting to break the silence, again, they're still coming out of government sources. Can you fully trust them? Maybe not. But you'll hear the stories now are, yes, there are extraterrestrials. Yes, we've been reverse engineering the technology. Yes, this has been happening for decades. All to prepare just the general psyche of society to accept what's coming. That, yeah, this has been going on for a long time. Now, why the aliens aren't here? I don't know. I can give you some assumptions. The first and simple one is we're just not ready. There was a time when we were more evolved and we were able to build structures like the Giza pyramids and Stonehenge and Machu Picchu and a lot of these amazing megalithic sites that speak of a time of the footprint of humanity's knowledge going well into the past. At those times, we were probably at a higher state of evolution where the aliens were interacting with us. Right now, we're not. So it might take time for us to make changes on our own, small changes, where we are then accepted into this galactic federation. And step one is stop blowing the planet up. Stop blowing each other up, right? So we've been getting this message for quite a while. But there's also a larger topic, Sean, which we probably won't be able to cover the full details today, which is the cycle of time. It's not linear. It's not that in the past there were the dark ages and we're headed towards a golden age. It's a linear cycle. And again, over 30 ancient cultures tracked a process of time, which we now call precession of the equinox. It's a 24,000 year cycle where we're moving essentially every 2,000 years, like a grand celestial clock, watching our stars change over 2,000 years. So that knowledge of our movements of the solar system, tracked by over 30 cultures, again, is enough evidence to say, they were aware of something beyond the knowledge that they had. They were given knowledge. But we're still trying to understand, where did those gods go? And why don't we see them today? I'll end it with saying to that question, perhaps the aliens in charge today, the ones that we're negotiating with, receiving technology, having treaties with, those are not the good guys. And perhaps the good gods eventually will return and there'll be, again, another celestial battle. But I'm only speculating.
Absolutely. Well, in terms of now, I know that some of your celebrated predecessors, people like Eric von Däniken, etc., have made great play of archaeology as proof of ancient visitations of some sort. To a skeptic who's watching this tonight, Jason, where would you point them to as a beginning point to awaken their minds, open their minds, or start a conversation on the whole ancient astronaut theory in terms of archaeology?
There's some really good sites that can just make your mind kind of explode with wonder. All across Bolivia, South America, we've got sites like Puma Punku. That's probably number one. Teotihuacan, Tiwanaku, Machu Picchu. What you see at a lot of these sites is a form of architecture that we cannot replicate. Megalithic stones pushed, stacked together so tightly you can't even fit a dollar bill between them. They almost look like as if they've been melted into place. We don't understand how they did this. So we see a type of technology across the world at a lot of these megalithic sites, Baalbek, Puma Punku, where these megalithic blocks have been quarried and then stacked with such precision, it rivals our technology today. So that's probably the first one. The other part of that is just looking at the precision of the type of architecture you see at these locations. Even in Egypt, the perfection of some of the old dynastic pharaohs and how they're represented, the perfection of the alignment of the pyramids and how they're built. There's just no way that this wasn't done without the assistance of high levels of technology. So if you can first wrap your brain around some of that, there's lots of technological references in the past. I've focused on many of these being on the show Ancient Aliens for the last 16 years on the History Channel. So showing things like a Baghdad battery. They found 13 so far of these ancient clay pots that were being used to actually create an electrical current. 2,500-year-old batteries. Light bulbs being used by the Egyptians in these dark recesses of tombs and crypts. No evidence of flame, no soot of anything burning. They were using electricity and light. So we see some of these micro pieces of technology, but there's massive evidence of the macro technology. Evidence would be like, what were the pyramids really being used for? Things like that.
Just as you're talking, Jason, I can understand why you're on season after season on the History Channel or wherever, because light bulbs are going off in my mind in terms of making the connections. Is that part of the attraction, do you think, to the whole ancient astronaut world, that it feels like being on the inside? It feels like a sort of secret treasure hunt of a sort?
I mean, it's Disneyland for adults, Sean. I'm very grateful and lucky to be a part of the team. We're currently on tour, Ancient Aliens Live. I think the website is Ancient Aliens Live Tour or ancientalienslive.com. And we're going city to city. Myself, Giorgio, Nick Pope, who used to run, the UK's Ministry of Defense UFO desk, William Henry, Nick Pope, Giorgio Tsoukalos, and myself. And we're on tour. And yes, it's very... I get a lot out of that, being on stage and being able to just sit with 1,000 people and raise the consciousness, open their minds. Most of them have already had their consciousness raised. That's why they're in the audience of a show like Ancient Aliens Live. But, whether it's the TV show or the live experiences, being able to bond with the community and say it's not me doing anything, it's us as a whole agreeing what our reality consists of. And that's something we form together as a society. There's things written in the books and we're told how we're supposed to believe. We now know what we should believe based on how we feel. And that's what's, I think, leading the new change.
Are you completely indifferent to what the Academy thinks of you and your researches?
I think people who have some reluctance to academic acceptance probably are grounded in some financial restriction. My paycheck, my job relies on me not speaking out of line or not going against academics. I stand apart. I'm an entrepreneur. I've built my own businesses. I fund my own research. I speak my own mind. But with doing that, it's allowed me, again, a position where I've aligned with the audience that matters, the people. So academics are going to be forced to continue to have to adapt to shows like Graham Hancock's, Ancient Apocalypse. It's an 8-hour special on Netflix where he goes all over North America and other parts of the world and shows you face to face the type of, again, obfuscation and denial. Well, we're not going to let you come to the Serpent's Mound here in Ohio and investigate it because we don't agree with your archaeological approach. Oh, really? And you expose that to the world? Lawsuits. No one wants to visit your Serpent's Mound because you're going to try and keep the truth from the public. That's not what we want. So that obfuscation path from academics to say, don't look here or don't believe this, that's quickly, getting squashed, again, by the public's voice to really want to know the truth and decide for themselves.
Unfortunately, our time has come to an end here, Jason. Tell people where they can find out more about you, about your tour, and also pick up a copy of your book, Ancient Astronauts.
Super easy there. It's ancientastronauts.com. Feel free to grab a copy of the book to support my research. Thank you. But you can also stay up to date on the tour and see some fun behind the scenes. My own glimpse of being a part of the research, being a part of the team. It's not always academic. It's a community and a lifestyle choice of understanding that, we're a part of something greater. So you'll see some of that flair come through on ancientastronauts.com, where it's not just all academic, it's a community. So yeah, thank you.
For now, Jason, thank you so much for coming on Things Visible and Invisible.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Things Visible and Invisible. We're dedicated to uncovering phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality, from ancient enigmas and paranormal encounters to scientific anomalies and forgotten histories. If you enjoyed this journey into the mysterious and unexplained, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell to stay updated on future explorations. Have a personal experience or story that aligns with our investigations? We'd love to hear from you. Visit our website at tvi.show and reach out through our contact form. While we can't feature every submission, we review them all, and your story might be featured in an upcoming episode. To support our continued investigations, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter or channel member. Your contributions make these explorations possible and give you access to exclusive content, early releases, and monthly behind-the-scenes discussions with our team. Don't forget to check out our merch store. We've got everything from TVI-branded t-shirts and hoodies to stickers and coffee mugs, perfect for showing your support while keeping the mysteries close. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time as we continue to explore the things visible and invisible.